All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Follow My Health Achieve, a new strategy to improve high-risk patient outcomes. We're delighted that you've joined us and are confident you will find this session educational and enlightening. All participants will be on mute during the session. You are encouraged to submit questions online during the presentation, however. Webinar moderators will monitor the questions submitted and share them with the speaker at the end of this webinar. If we don't have time to answer all questions today, we will distribute the answers in an email document over the next few days. We are fortunate to have an excellent speaker and expert presenter for our webinar today, Skyler Wason with Allscripts Product Management. Skyler has been integral to the development of Follow My Health Achieve with a deep commitment to ensuring an exceptional user experience and superior functionality for client success. Skyler?
Thanks, Elizabeth. So we all know that healthcare is changing. We're moving away from fee-for-service to payment models that are geared towards maximizing positive outcomes and the quality of care. Healthcare organizations are assuming more risk, and this shift is requiring them to analyze patient populations to identify patients on a dangerous health course and work with them to improve their health. We know what these patients need to do, but how do we actually get them to do it? Where Follow My Health Achieve steps in. It provides a mechanism for the provider to engage patients in their health care. It is a monitoring compliance application which leverages wireless devices, existing EHR functionality, and the patient portal to improve those outcomes. Today, Achieve integrates with TouchWorks version 11.4.1 and up, Professional EHR version 14.1, as well as Sunrise Clinical Manager version 6.1 and up. So chronic disease is one of the biggest forces driving this change in our healthcare system. And the picture is pretty scary. There's about 133 million Americans that have at least one chronic condition. Those chronic conditions account for 75% of all of our healthcare spending and cause 7 out of 10 deaths each year. Healthcare costs for patients with at least one chronic disease is 5 times greater than that for patients without a chronic disease. And these statistics are from Triple Solution for a Healthier America, as well as the CDC. Let's also take a closer look at the remote monitoring market. It's pretty big. In fact, it's about $18.9 billion big. Use of home monitoring is going to reduce the number of bed days by 25% and the number of hospital admissions by 20%, which will result in $36 billion in savings by the year 2018. So as you can see, home monitoring really improves outcomes and will significantly reduce costs. And these statistics are available from Juniper Research and the Veterans Health Administration. So this diagram covers the entire Achieve workflow in TouchWorks. The workflow is slightly different in Professional and SDM, but the concepts are essentially the same. The provider's workflow is different within the applications, but the way the patient will experience it from within the portal, the way that they'll interact with Achieve, is the same across all 3 products. So an order is placed for the patient to do something at home. For example, we want you to lose 10 pounds in the next 3 months, or keep your blood pressure below 140/90 for the next 30 days. This order then appears as a goal in the Follow My Health patient portal, where there's tools to help the patient track their progress and monitor compliance. Integration with wireless devices can be leveraged to automatically capture data related to the goal that's been set for the patient. And then readings are analyzed and notification can be sent back into TouchWorks or Pro or Sunrise if the patient's not following the order or if any readings violate rules that were set for the patient when that order was placed. Now, if the patient doesn't choose to use wireless devices, they can manually enter data into the portal. So maybe they've got a regular scale or an existing glucometer at home. They can still leverage those existing devices. When notifications are triggered, results for all active Achieve orders for that patient that were placed by that provider are updated, and that provides a current picture of how the patient is doing on all their goals. The provider can then review the notifications, the patient's goals, and their progress to determine if intervention is necessary and to get that patient back on track. This process continues until the patient reaches the goal, at which time the order is completed, and we send in final results back to TouchWorks, back to Pro, back to SCM. So today we have 4 order types, and each one has monitoring rules specific to one or more conditions. Monitor weight is used for congestive heart failure patients, and it can alert the provider if the patient's weight changes by a certain amount over a certain time period, or if the patient's not complying with the order. Weight management is intended for obesity, but it can also be used for other conditions. This is a goal for the patient to gain or lose a set amount of weight over a certain time period, and we can let the provider know if the patient's not following the order. Monitor blood glucose will notify the provider if the patient's blood sugar readings are outside of set ranges or if they're not complying with the order, and obviously that's used for diabetic patients. And then finally, we have our monitor blood pressure order, which can be used for patients with hypertension, and that one can notify if the patient's not compliant or their blood pressure falls outside of ranges defined for that patient. So what if we can also leverage Achieve to take work off the provider or care team's plate? The Achieve application itself is essentially set it and forget it. The care team doesn't need to worry about if the patient has anything going wrong, because Achieve's going to tell them if something goes wrong. They don't have to continually check up on them and monitor them. However, someone still needs to intervene if something is amiss. Email or text message reminders and goal alerts can keep the patient on task without the additional work of an intervention. These can also be shared with a family member that's assisting with the patient's care. Achieve can work with the patient and their family to keep them on track and only pull on the provider when needed. So imagine caring for an elderly parent who lives a few hours away and has congestive heart failure, or a child who's a freshman in college with type 1 diabetes that just moved out on their own for the first time. Achieve and the patient portal can provide real-time information and peace of mind for that family member. It can also enlist their help if the patient's not complying with the order or if any readings are out of range. So Achieve really has 2 distinct sets of users. We have the clinical staff as well as the patients. The product needs to function effectively within the provider's workflow, but it's ultimately the patient's success that's going to drive those better outcomes. So we need to make it very easy for the patient to follow the care plan and work towards reaching their goal. And one of the best ways to do this is to minimize the work we're asking the patient to do. That's where the wireless devices step in. They can be used to push that data directly to the portal, and by using these tools, the patient's not required to track their results and manually enter them into the portal. This is going to save them a lot of time and reduce the potential for errors. So today we integrate with Withing's wireless scale and smart body analyzer, which allow us to capture weight readings, as well as Withing's blood pressure monitor for blood pressure readings. And then Telcare makes a blood glucose meter that uses cellular connection to send us blood glucose readings. We also integrate with iHealth Labs. They have a couple of different scales, blood pressure monitors, and glucometers available to push that data in. So at this point, I'm going to jump into the application and show you a demo of how Achieve works within TouchWorks. So I'm logged in, and we're looking at patient Mike Ruby. He's got congestive heart failure, and we're actually going to place an order for him to monitor his weight and his blood pressure at home using Achieve. So I'm going to go ahead and select the order for monitoring weight for 60 days. I'm going to choose a performing location of FollowMyHealth. That's how we know that it's an Achieve order and to send it to the patient in the portal. And this particular order is configured to notify the ordering provider if the patient's weight increases at least 3 pounds in a day or at least 5 pounds in a week, or if he doesn't take any readings for 3 days. We're also going to grab the monitor blood pressure order. And again, I will set it to FollowMyHealth so that it knows to go to the portal. And in this case, we're going to get a notification if the patient's systolic blood pressure is less than 90 or greater than 160, if his diastolic blood pressure is less than 60 or greater than 95, or if he doesn't take any readings for 3 days. So let's go ahead and jump over to the portal, and we'll log in as Mike and show you what that looks like from his perspective. So those Achieve orders came over the interface to Follow My Health, where they now show up as goals. You can see in the Action Center that Mike has 2 new goals. Those are the orders that we just placed. In addition, he also gets inbox messages letting him know that he has new goals. We have created a new Goals tab under My Health. This is where all the Achieve orders live. The first step in the process is for Mike to actually accept the goals and consent to sharing information back with the ordering provider. We also have a disclaimer on here letting him know that this is not intended for emergency situations and that if it is an emergency, he should call 911. He can see the goals that were placed. So we wanted to monitor his weight for 60 days, and we wanted to maintain a blood pressure less than 140/90 for the next 30 days. And you can see who requested them and the clinic that they're associated with. Mike then has the option to accept or decline each of these goals. If he declines it, it's going to send a notification back into TouchWorks letting the ordering provider know that happens. They can then intervene and get him back on track. I'm going to click Continue here. That then moves the goals to Mike's active goal section where he can see more information related to these goals. So for the monitor weight one, supposed to weigh himself first thing in the morning after urinating but before eating or drinking, wearing similar clothing and always using the same scale. And he's looking for an increase of 3 pounds in a day or 5 pounds in a week. Those are based on the rules that we notify on. And then Mike has the option to enter his weight manually or connect to a Withings scale or an iHealth Lab scale to automatically have those readings pushed in to Follow My Health. And again, he still has the option to decline the goal. He can decline any active goal at any point in the process. Go ahead and enter a reading for today for weight, and we'll put them in as 150 just to keep the numbers easy. I save that. That goes into the system. We analyze it. In this case, everything checks out. There's no problems. So we give him a banner across the top telling him that everything's okay. You can see that the UI has changed again. We now have a graph that shows how he's doing, where he's at. I can add additional readings manually. I can still connect to a Withings scale, and I can still decline the goal if I choose. I'm going to add a new reading for today, and we'll put it in as 154 pounds so that we actually break one of those rules. Goes into the system, we analyze it, and obviously, he gained 4 pounds in roughly 30 seconds, so that counts as at least 3 pounds in a day. He gets a goal alert across the top of the screen letting him know that his weight increased by at least 3 pounds in a day, and then you can see on the graph here that one of the readings is actually flagged as breaking that rule. That also triggered a notification that went back to TouchWorks to let the ordering provider know that that occurred. This banner across the top is the goal alert functionality. We can also send Mike a text message or an email when one of these events occurs, and that can also be shared with a family member or a proxy for him. So somebody that he's given access to his portal account, they can also receive that information. The maintain a blood pressure less than 140/90 for 30 days works essentially the exact same way. The patient instructions are configured differently for this order. He can enter his blood pressure manually. He can connect to a wireless device to have that stuff pushed in. Just enter a reading real quick to show you what it looks like. Go ahead and save that off. Goes in the system, we analyze it, everything checks out, and he gets a graph showing him his systolic goal, his diastolic goal, and where that last reading was. You can see that it's below those lines for each. Let's go ahead and jump back in to TouchWorks and pull up the notification that we received. So this is the task that came in because of Mike's weight gain. So he gets a brand new FollowMyHealth Achieve notification. This is a task type specific to Achieve. You can use the existing task functionality within TouchWorks to control who's responsible for managing this queue and who ultimately sees these notifications. But all the Achieve issues come in as FollowMyHealth Achieve notifications. At the top is a summary of why we just sent it. So in this case, for the monitor weight for 60 days order, his weight increased to at least 3 pounds in a day, and we show you the 2 readings that broke that rule. And you can see that they were patient-entered as opposed to coming from the Withings scale or an iHealth Lab scale. There's an order summary section that shows you who placed the order, when the patient started it, when it's going to end, the rules that are configured on it that trigger those notifications, as well as the patient instructions that reflect what Mike sees in the portal. And then there's a notification history section that shows you everything that's ever gone wrong for this order for this patient, which may or may not affect how you decide to respond to it. We've created a new FollowMyHealth Achieve notification dialog window that allows you to add comments. Maybe you called the patient and left them a message and you want to document that here. You can also send a message right back to the portal. Maybe Mike needs to come in and get his meds adjusted and you would want to just send him that message right away. I can change the delegation. I can change the priority. I can assign this to somebody else. I can pretty much do whatever is available with normal tasking within TouchWorks. I'm going to jump over to the clinical desktop and show you the results that filed in. You can see here we have our monitor blood pressure and our monitor weight order. Go ahead and pull that up. And for some reason, it's not letting me do that. There we go. So you can see he has an order summary at the top. That's very similar to what you would see in the notification. You can see that the results are preliminary right now. That's because this Achieve goal is still open. You can see the notification history, so that's everything that's ever gone wrong with this order. And then we have the measurements shown here. Now, this is coming in as textual data today within TouchWorks. We eventually want to make it discrete data so that it can be pulled into flow sheets, vitals, the chart notes, any other place in the application where it makes sense to leverage this data. Okay, so jump back into PowerPoint. Okay, so let's talk a bit about where we're going with Achieve. So we're aggressively developing new features, and we're really just beginning to scratch the surface of what Achieve can do. The obvious enhancements are going to be to include additional order types and device integration. So we plan to expand orders to include things like monitoring Coumadin INR, pulse oximetry, peak flow, pain management, rescue inhaler usage for asthmatic or COPD patients, just to name a few. Our vision is really to be device agnostic. We don't really care where the data comes from. We just need to make it easy and cost effective to get the data that we need to help the patient reach their goals. Our main concern is just that the data be accurate. We'll integrate with additional scales and blood pressure monitors, as well as other devices like pulse oximeters, activity trackers, sleep monitors, whatever makes sense. Ideally, the patient will say, hey, I've already got one of those scales at home when the doctor is asking them to monitor their weight at home. So there's also opportunities for us to create better integration between TouchWorks, SCM, and Achieve. We're going to add editable Achieve orders and cleaner access to the Achieve data. So that was the discrete data that I mentioned. Achieve is really application agnostic, just like the FollowMyHealth portal. The goals and notifications are eventually going to flow between Achieve and Care Director, Achieve and Home Care, even other third-party products. It doesn't really matter how that order is queued up. We need a way to get that goal to show up for the patient in the portal. We need a way to collect that data and help that patient reach that outcome. So that's the end of the presentation. So at this point, I will turn it back over to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Skyler. That was very interesting, and I think it was great to see the product actually in action. We do obviously have time for some questions for the attendees who have seen this practical hands-on presentation. There are no questions right now in the queue, so if you do have questions, please type it in to your GoToMeeting screen under the bar that says questions. We'll wait for a few minutes and see if anyone has anything that they'd like to discuss with Skyler. All right, we do have a question. Will there be a presentation featuring Allscript Pro? I do think we have that planned for later this year. Skyler, can you give us an idea of the timing, what that might be?
Sure. So we are finishing up testing of that functionality right now. That will be available in September. We're going to go through an EA process with a few clients just to make sure everything checks out before we make it officially available. We can do demos now. We didn't have that slated to do it for today, but if you reach out to your AOE, they should be able to get you a demo of how that works. The functionality is a bit different. We've integrated with the Care Plans and Goals module within Professional EHR, and we actually did an API integration so that when you click to add a goal, you're actually adding a FollowMyHealth Achieve goal directly from the Achieve piece within Pro. So we're actually really excited about that integration. We just didn't have that ready to show for you today.
And what we are planning is we will have a series of, this particular series of webinars was intended to be TouchWorks specific. Sunrise webinars are coming up too, and we'll have dedicated ones for Pro so that you can actually see it working with that EHR as well. And we'd advise folks to keep an eye on their Client Connect calendars. That's where those will be appearing. Another question came in, Skyler. Can you speak to the additional costs this type of integration brings to Allscript clients?
Sure. So this is billed on a per provider per month basis based on your FollowMyHealth portal users. So that's something that you can get more details from your AOE on the specifics, but we tried to peg it so this was an add-on to the portal so that it would be very affordable.
Skyler, do you want to touch on just the implementation timeline as well for Achieve?
Yeah, I can do that. So this is actually quite simple to implement. Basically, we just have to turn on the Achieve functionality for you within your test portal system and install an interface. Once that's done, there's some Achieve order configuration that happens within the FollowMyHealth dashboard and some corresponding setup that occurs within TouchWorks or within SCM. Once that's in place, you can set those orders and send them to the patients via that interface. So the timeline for implementation can be anywhere from a few weeks to a few months, depending on how quickly your organization wants to move. But the setup itself is not difficult.
Another question has come in, Skyler. Can you give a little more detail, explain how the provider is notified when a patient declines a goal that's been sent for FollowMyHealth Achieve?
Sure. What happens is we generate a FollowMyHealth Achieve notification that says the patient declined this goal. So the doctor would receive it in the same way that they would if the patient had a reading that violated one of the rules that they set up.
That's great. I think that one of our attendees has quote-unquote raised their hand as opposed to typing a question in. We're going to take, oh, never mind. I'm sorry, I'm reading these as they came in. Another question has been asked, I guess. So I guess we've taken care of that. So.
Was there another question?
No, that was a repeat with what the previous one was, and she ended up typing it in, so I think we're good. And I don't see any other...
That's a slightly different question, I think. So this one was if the patient has not accepted or declined a certain goal within a certain amount of time, will the doc be notified? Yes, we do have a rule for that. So we track whether or not the patient has started it, and if they haven't started it in a certain number of days, you can set it so that you'll get a notification. That's a little bit different than the non-compliance notification when they're not taking their readings. So you can be notified if they haven't started it or if they have started it and they stop taking the readings.
Good. I don't see any other questions in the queue, so I think we've probably reached the end of this webinar. We want to express our appreciation to Skyler for this excellent discussion. The slides will be available on the Allscripts website, and the link will be sent to all attendees. In addition, this session will be repeated 3 times. There's another one set for September 23rd, October 21st, and December 12th. If you believe any of your colleagues would find the webinar valuable, please encourage them to register for one of the subsequent sessions via the TouchWorks Client Connect site. And as we mentioned earlier, there'll be similar notifications for the Sunrise clients and Pro clients if you have colleagues who might be interested in seeing how FollowMyHealth Achieve works within a EHR environment. With that, we want to thank you for attending this webinar, and we hope you have a wonderful week.